So for this week and really through the end of the course, you're going to learn about qualitative data. Now the field book does not get into qualitative data at all. I've provided resources on Canvas for you to read, several PDFs, several articles, that sort of thing. So be sure to do that because it's referenced specifically in your assignments, in your future exam, those sorts of things. So what do we mean by qualitative data? Qualitative data are not just simply numeric values, right? Like we've been messing with before, they are not a rating of quality of life after you have plastic surgery. They are not, overall grades on the course, that sort of thing. These are data that are typically observed and recorded, but non-numerical in nature. And we collect this type of data in numerous ways. I can be an observer in this classroom and just take notes on what questions are asked, your facial expressions if you're sharing your video, right? How often students chime in, all that kind of stuff. That's simply observation. We all observe in our day-to-day life, but qualitative data analysis takes observation to the extreme, right? Noting any and all details that are relevant to the study. We can also do one-on-one interviews or focus groups with very specific individuals that are selected to talk about some broader discussion. And so there's numerous ways of doing this. Has anyone here ever participated in a focus group, by the way? Ratane, Mamta, or Ken?
Can you repeat the question?
Have you ever participated in a focus group?
I guess lately in data collection, we've been talking about the subject and reading articles about focus groups and doing discussions about it as well.
So you haven't actually done one or participated in one?
Nah, not necessarily.
Kind of fun. Once you know about focus groups, and you see other people do them, all I do is critique them because I think there's definitely a right way and definitely a wrong way of doing it. But the qualitative data can be collected in all of those different methods. Typically, if we're collecting quantitative data, we're either using secondary data from somewhere else, someone else collected it, or we are doing surveys to collect data, or we are maybe looking at statistics that, again, someone else has already calculated, or we're maybe interviewing, but interviewing people in such a way where we are classifying their responses in numerical form. So if you get an evaluation for this program, and it asks questions like Likert scale questions, do you strongly agree or strongly disagree or somewhere in between, even though those are ordinal responses, they have numerical values attached to them, right? So it's sort of qualitative, sort of quantitative. Qualitative data is typically considered ordinal and nominal. And nominal, as you might remember, are simply just labels, right? Hair color, eye color, the name of your major, right? All of that's nominal. We don't have an average major or an average eye color. That's because you can't quantify it in that way. You can only do frequency analysis on it. So knowing that going into it, that this type of information is not going to be used in some sort of a t-test or a correlation matrix or anything like that, it means we also have to analyze it in a different way. So there are a couple of ways that we approach the collection and analysis of qualitative data. And I know, like Bryson, you said, you're doing this kind of in data collection. Not everyone in this course is in data collection, so disclaimer, I have to go through it because not everyone's on the same page, right? Cool. Laura Beth, you're not in data collection, are you? Kara, are you? You are. Ratane is. Mamta, are you in data collection?
No.
Okay. Ken? Okay. So when we talk about approaches, the use of a deductive approach involves really just analyzing data that's already been predetermined to fit some sort of roadmap, right? We use our questions to guide us in how we analyze the data. So I've already got in my head maybe an entire interview questionnaire, and I'm going to stick to that questionnaire and ask you all the questions and hope to be able to answer whatever research questions I'm asking, right? The opposite of that really is kind of an inductive approach where there's really not a predetermined structure, but maybe I want to talk to each of you about advising in your program. Do you feel like you've had a good experience with your advisor? And maybe I want to touch on a couple of things specifically, but there's really no roadmap. If let's just say, if Rajane says, I think I've got the best advisor in the whole wide world, then I'm going to say, tell me why, right? I'm just gonna let that take its course. And if we have time, I'll ask other questions, necessary to review. But overall, the approach itself is very different. I am not an inductive person. I don't usually take the inductive approach. I'm much more of a control freak. I want to make sure we get through everything. But I've got colleagues who do it marvelously well. So just know that the idea of qualitative data doesn't necessarily mean that we are as structured as we have been with all of our quantitative analysis. It really is different. So in terms of interviews, and honestly, y'all, some of this, you might think is pretty elementary, but there really is a science to the interview process. It's pretty common, and you don't just want to interview someone and ask them, would you say you strongly disagree, somewhat disagree, or neutral, somewhat agree, or somewhat strongly agree, rather, with the following statement? And then I ask each of you the question and expect each of you to tell me which one, right? Why would I waste my time doing that? You can do that on a sheet of paper by circling a response, right? The reason we have interviews and focus groups is to get a lot more substance. So instead of asking those kinds of questions that we might find on a survey documentation, I'm going to really instead say, give me an example or tell me more about X, Y, and Z, right? What was the one thing in your childhood that persuaded you to pursue a higher education? Right? That you can't quantify that, right? I'm sure if I asked all of y'all that question right now, we'd probably get a lot of different responses. Some may be family, some may be TV. I've actually had a lot of people tell me, I watched the show Doogie Howser. Anybody ever watched Doogie Howser? I wanted to be a doctor, right? But the thing is that the interview itself lends itself well to getting much more in depth than any survey form could, right? So the focus group specifically, this is essentially multiple people being interviewed all at the same time. However, the purpose of a focus group is not only to get responses from you that I could also get on one-on-one, but to see how the group itself interacts. So I talked to one of my colleagues about this at a different campus just last week because they want to get some students together to talk about access to services on campus. And I said, well, are you going to get a homogeneous group together for each focus group, or are you going to get a heterogeneous group? And they were like, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, your students' ages range from, eight, not, we can't really include high schools here, because they don't even come to campus, but 18 all the way up to about 50, and quite a few students across those age ranges. So it's not like there's only like 10 people that are over 40. So I said, we've got a lot of different services, and do you want those students that are in that 18 to 25 range that are probably more likely to be on campus regularly, all in the same group, and then all of the older students in the same group, or do you want to have them mixed together so that they see and they learn from each other, and they also, and that interaction comes through in the focus group interview. So if you're thinking about doing a focus group, it really takes more planning than the actual focus group takes to execute. Generally, that's my rule of thumb. If you're planning a focus group, you should probably spend at least twice as long planning it than you should actually be in the room with these people. So, I've got the example here, right? Looking at track runners, we're going to look at students who are athletes, versus non-athletes. Well, if we're really trying to understand the usage of our gym or physical recreation facilities on campus, we probably want to have either some diversity in the room or be very clear as to what types of groups we have in each focus group. Because oftentimes when you have a homogeneous group, we find that there seems to be one mentality that might shine through. And that's not always a bad thing, because it could be true. But you also have people who are less likely to chime in, right? So there are a lot of dynamics with regards to focus group interviews that you really need to think about. As a sociologist, every focus group is like a petri dish for me. I'm like, ooh, I can watch people not interact or interact. It's kind of fun. So the next one, secondary records. This is something that a lot of people don't think about, but our secondary records are everywhere. I mean, I don't use a lot of paper. I don't. But when I was at an institution, one of the first jobs I had, because we were going through what's called reaccreditation, the regional accreditor was coming to review the entire institution. I had to go back through all of our catalogs to figure out when we first offered programs, right? That's using secondary records. It's very much like archival material, or reading, logs where people have signed in for meetings. This is a little bit more tedious and not nearly as fun, but I know a lot of people who just love, sitting down and going through all this kind of stuff. So pulling out secondary records is definitely something. The last option, or the last methodology to talk about, is participant observation. And really what this is imagine wherever you go, like just putting it under the microscope. And so if, let's just say, you were observing, let's see, someone tell me somewhere you've been in public. Actually, Laura Beth, you said you got your booster shot, right?
Yep. I went
Were
to
you in a
CPS.
waiting room? Yeah.
Yeah, it was just outside the pharmacy.
Okay, so how long did you have to wait for?
Probably 6 minutes.
Okay. Were there other people there?
Yes.
What did you observe about them?
That they were on their phones, and one of them was speaking Spanish.
Okay. What were their genders, races, ethnicities?
One was male and one was female, and I think one was Caucasian and one was Latino.
Okay. Anything else you know about them? How are they dressed?
Yeah, very differently from each other, and dressed far better than me. It's a sweatpants day.
I see. Yeah, no worries. No judgment. Were they nervous? I mean, they're about to get a shot.
Yeah, they didn't seem nervous.
Okay. Seemed pretty
But they
confident.
were probably happy because it was free. I was happy it was free.
It should be free. You should never have to pay for this kind of a vaccine or a booster. But let me ask you this: how about the person who administered the shot?
He didn't say much. He was writing most of the time and was dressed in a lab coat.
Okay, so he had his like he had his costume on, right? That's what I like to call it. Yeah, yeah. If I was teaching y'all in person, like actually in class, I'd wear a costume too. I'd probably have on like a shirt, coat, all that kind of stuff. But that's, by the way, that's called dramaturgy. The way we perceive people in different environments, in different social settings, and how we create our own expectations and unrealities by dressing, looking, talking, speaking. Every week I do it with y'all. I have to. I mean, that's my job is to teach, right? But if I told you that all of your faculty members you've ever had are really just playing their part on this big old stage, right? It might bum me out a little bit. So all that to say, though, you can observe. I mean, y'all heard about it. She observed a lot, probably without even realizing that she did it. I don't know. You might have been thinking about these people while they were sitting there. I went to the doctor today too. I forgot to tell you that. I got a shot too, a flu shot. I've got my booster coming, but I didn't want to mix, even though there's not really a lot of issues with mixing them. I didn't want to mix them just because my wife's family's coming into town next week. I've got to be on my A game, right? So I was in the waiting room, and there were a lot of new patients. You know how I know? Because they all had clipboards with like a stack of paper this high. And I was like, ooh, it is getting cold outside. You're not feeling well. You've not been to the doctor in forever. Welcome to the doctor's office, right? No one with outwardly observational, like no one with that had observable, like ailments, right? But male, female, African American, white, not other races or ethnicities. It was just those two in the waiting room. I sat in the far back, like a good, person at the movie theater, like watching a movie, and I really didn't watch them too often. But what I did notice is that everyone came in alone. Everyone came in alone, and that struck me because I'm used to being in doctors' offices where there's no, and there were no children, absolutely no children, and I thought that was weird. So in my head, I'm thinking like, you know, are kids just going to school sick or what? But all that to say, we observe more often than we probably think, and this type of data collection, there's really a spectrum of how we can do it. Laura Beth and I, we were very much not interacting with other people in this realm, right? We were participating in the process because you were waiting to get a shot. I was waiting to get my annual physical and my shot. But we weren't like all doing something together. Whenever I was in grad school, I did a study with under-resourced farmers, low-income farmers, and we would go and we would put up these hoop houses. Do y'all know what I mean by a hoop house? Okay, basically like a semicircle, and there's lots of poles, and then you put the big old plastic sheet over it. It creates a greenhouse effect. But that was very much like actively participating in the observation, because while I was there and I was observing, I was also helping through the process. I wasn't just standing there taking notes and making everyone feel really uncomfortable. So if ever y'all do an observational study, know that there's different ways to either be actively participating or kind of on the sidelines. observing. Definitely benefits to both when you're actively participating like I was. I'm sure I missed a lot, right? I was too busy trying not to like break a knuckle or break a finger with all the tools that we were using. But all that to say, I was interacting with people and also hearing them much more than if I would have just been standing on the sidelines. So, okay, that's participant observation. Also, longitudinal studies. This is not just for qualitative. It's also quantitative. We do interviews that go on for many years. The Department of Education surveys and interviews students from the time they enter college all the way through, and even sometimes into the workforce. And those data are generally quantified, but still there are labels. I'm going to pull up a couple of examples of those studies, because I just did some contract work for the Department of Ed to do kind of a walkthrough of those data tools. So once those data tools get published, I'll send them back out to you. You'll be able to say, hey, my professor wrote that script. But the Department of Ed does do longitudinal studies that collect both quantifiable and qualitative data. And these are longitudinal in the sense that students are selected as a sample, and then they're interviewed, and then they may go into a longitudinal study. So just so you know, longitudinal studies can both be qualitative and quantitative. And then we've got this method of case study. Goodness gracious, I've got to fix that. Keep an eye on that slide for a second. So the case study is one approach where we can look at and gather data through a variety of different situations, right? And so when we talk about maybe utilizing different methods for increasing student engagement, right, in these courses or in programs, we can have different case studies. One which focuses on increasing engagement for students that live off campus, right? I mean, that's kind of hard to do. Students that live off campus may only come to school for classes and then head home or go to work. For students that live on campus, there's generally a lot of programming in the dorms. There's a lot of programming on the quad. There's a lot of other options for them to be engaged. So when we talk about a case study, we can utilize different approaches to basically focus in on specific populations. So this is not a forthcoming article anymore. Let me get it. Give me a sec. Sorry. So it just got published about 2 weeks ago. Yeah, I know. Another notch on the belt, right? Let me see if I can find it. Sorry, y'all. I think this is it. All right, coming to you in the chat. You don't have to pay for it. I wrote it. You know the owner, you know the author. But at least you can see just some examples of what we mean by case studies. This is not necessarily a case study for one outcome for each individual. This is really to help people understand how we approached increasing our efficiency and our capacity at the onset of the pandemic. So there's that. Let me make sure. Here we go. So, yep. All right. So basically, different case studies looking at understanding enrollment. Case study 1, case study 2, projecting enrollment comparisons. Like three case studies related to enrollment, 1 related to faculty and staff, 2 related to professional development and continuing ed. So not necessarily like the most scientific types of case studies, but at least it'll give you an understanding of what we mean by choosing a case, following it through, detailing what happened, and then being able to write out what exactly you're using it for. Now, in terms of focus groups and interviews, remember how I told you sometimes you spend just twice as long preparing for it than you do actually doing it? The reason why is because you've really got to be prepared for anything. This is human interaction. It would be so much easier if I could just hand you a sheet of paper and you tell me everything without me having to ask, right? But if I ask, let's just say I ask you a question, and then I do this. How much are you actually gonna like? Are you gonna care, or are you gonna be engaged, or I mean, are you just like, what the hell, right? So one of the hardest things to do within interviews and focus groups is to build rapport. One of the best ways to do that is to have empathy, and I suck at that. Delaney will tell you I am like not a good bedside manner doctor person, but it is something that, especially if you are asking people to talk about something that could be painful, bring up difficult memories, anything like that, you need to be respectful and be prepared for what comes out. When participants open up to you, or maybe go down a different path than you expected, the first and foremost thing you need to do is let them, right? You need to let them. And it's difficult, again, for control freaks like me that say, no, I've only got 30 minutes. I really wanted to talk to you about, your dog or something. If you're in a focus group situation where you do have multiple people, you need to be aware that people might not feel as comfortable divulging and talking through difficult things, which is one reason why you might choose an interview protocol over a focus group protocol, right? Simply because if it's more sensitive, why bring people together to talk about something sensitive and then shut down, right? When you could have just done it one-on-one and actually got people to open up a little bit more. If you're conducting a focus group, it's really important that you set the ground rules at the very beginning. And those ground rules usually have to do with confidentiality, right? Not only with the interviewer, but confidentiality of the group. Not even using necessarily your real name if you don't want to, if it's that kind of a focus group where people might not know each other. But also letting people know that we're not going to talk over each other. We're going to listen to everything you have to say, but to be respectful of everyone else's time and opportunities to be able to participate, we do ask that you be mindful that we only have a limited amount of time, right? So setting those kinds of ground rules in the interviews and focus groups is a really important step. And in addition, you definitely don't want to ask any kind of biased questions or leading questions. And what we mean by a leading question is making assumptions when we ask a question that there might be an issue at hand. So this first one, do you have any problems with your boss? It's kind of expecting you to say, we all want to say yes, generally, whenever we talk. We all want to be helpful as people to other people. And so if I ask you, do you have any problems with your boss? That's asking for a negative type of response. If I instead ask, tell me about your relationship with your boss, you're more than welcome to tell me about the problems, but you might also want to talk to me about the positives too, right? So when we think about how we interview people, remember how earlier I told you, I do not want to hand someone or ask someone interview questions that they could easily just do check marks or circles on a sheet of paper, right? I don't want to waste someone's time. I want to dive a lot deeper and get as much information as I can from each person. And so the ways we do this are through either a structured or a semi-structured interview protocol. In a structured protocol, This is essentially having each question listed, like ready to go. And regardless of how they respond, we always move on to the next question or the next section, right? So tell me what you think about the recent change in university policy. If the interview said, I think it's been a difficult change, but I understand why it happened, I might say, do you want to expand on that? And they might say yes or no, whatever. Either way, the next question I'm going to ask is, how do you feel about academic load, which is, courses that we teach and that sort of thing. Not a lot of digging there, right? We left our shovel at home. And in a semi-structured interview, however, this leaves it up to the the interviewer, to really just dive in anytime they feel like they need to or they should. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on whether changes in university policy have changed the work of our faculty. And then the interviewer says, absolutely, it's increased. Well, that's a really nice, succinct response, but I want to know in what way has it increased. And then they may go into it and say, I find myself doing a lot more paperwork and forms. And I'll say, can you give me specific examples of what types of paperwork and forms? You see, and so you keep going until you get to that natural stop. That kind of a semi-structured interview can go really quickly, really fast. You can go through 15 minutes in what feels like 5. So you kind of have to balance what you're trying to get through an interview versus the need for more detail. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but just come back to this slide when you download it from Canvas. It's always important to put off, again, that outward appearance that you want to be a welcoming person that people want to talk to, whether it's on the phone or in person or even on Zoom, right? So dress appropriately. Don't make people feel that they're just being interviewed just to be interviewed. You never know how much someone's already been talked to or talked at about something. And so make sure that there's a true purpose for your questions, and don't ask them if it's not important. Definitely stay neutral. Definitely stay neutral. And this is a really hard one. I have had, I'm not lying to y'all when I tell you this. I did 1,000 interviews over the course of a summer in 2 different, very small communities in the Mississippi Delta. And I spoke to people from a lot of different backgrounds, and I heard a lot of different words said that I did not appreciate. It was their perspective, and I'm not kidding, I literally had to sit there and just take notes and let my recorder do the recording. So it's difficult to stay neutral and not interrupt people and minimize your own examples, your own experiences. But the purpose of the interview is to let the interviewee speak, right, and to let their voice be heard. So that's something that it just takes a lot of exercise sometimes to do. So if you miss a question, I'm just going to jump to the end here. One of the important things that I realized is if you accidentally miss a question, that could be one shot and done. You might have knocked on their door, or you may have given them a call. If they see you calling back, they don't have to answer. And in fact, I wouldn't expect them to. Whenever I was going house to house in these communities, there was one time I actually I left my bag there, and thankfully they put it on the porch. But it was clear they didn't want me bothering them anymore, so they just left it on the porch, and if I got it, I got it. But anyhow, has anyone here ever really done a lot of interviewing or focus group, like leading a focus groups? I know no one's been in a focus group. Laura Beth?
I was actually going to chime in and say, I'm in the Technology Leadership and Management program, so I'm taking this class as an elective. But our capstone course is called Human-Centered Design, and we facilitated a project in it, and Juliana was in my group. And one of the activities we did was actually called interview for empathy, and it was during the pandemic, so we had to do this what you called a semi-structured interview. But if it hadn't been the pandemic, I think we would have been in person. But anyway, just wanted to say these tips all look really good, even in a different field or with a different technique. But I'm surprised to hear you say maybe you don't have the empathy during the interviews, but that's okay.
Oh, oh no, it's not that I don't have empathy during interviews. I don't have empathy at all.
Okay.
And I'm laughing when I say it, y'all, but I am not a nice guy. Like I know. I mean, if I am at work, like it is work face. I love teaching, and I hope you noticed that over this semester. I really do love teaching, and so it helps me be a little bit more human. But in my work world, I am responsible for managing a whole lot of things. And when you are expected to manage processes and people, it's difficult to remember the human aspect sometimes. But tell me more though. This
Yeah.
isn't about me, right? Tell me more about that. You said it was a focus group or something
It
about
was an
empathy?
interview. So we were interested in farmers and their interactions with hydroponic farms, and it was really to
Cool.
just sort of get our ideas flowing and to actually have the intended users' experiences captured in the project somewhere. So we interviewed Juliana's grandfather and my mother-in-law, and we had the same questions. We built the questions as a team, and then we asked them independently, and sort of sketched up the responses in this pretty diagram that the technique suggests we use, and like has quadrants of things they talked about. But yeah, it's a great course if anyone else is interested in it, but definitely totally different from this qualitative interviewing stuff. It wasn't intended to make any sort of metrical. There was no grade. It was, we want to hear what the user has on their farm, and we want to use this information to identify a problem that we can solve. So it was really exploratory.
Cool. Very cool. Kara, did you raise your hand about focus or interviews rather?
I in my last job, I did kind of more like group facilitation. So it wasn't interviewing per se in order to gather details, but it was kind of being the point person in a group of folks who had to get to know one another. And so facilitating their conversations. And a lot of these things have a significant amount of overlap, specifically the part about having empathy. But we also had to make sure that we kept things on track. And well, the funny joke was, out of all of the facilitators, I was the meanest one because we had a time limit. And it was like, you have 30 minutes and 10 people have to talk. And so I was like, look, I'm going to give you a signal when you have 30 seconds, and that's, you got to wrap up your story at that point. I'm friendly about it, but so it's really interesting. I think the idea of balancing being empathetic, but also accomplishing what you're there to accomplish, and not letting kind of over empathizing run away with things. I think that can maybe be tricky sometimes for folks.
Yep. I'm like, good job, great, thanks for sharing. Let's move on, right? Yeah. No, I don't do that to y'all. I don't do that to y'all. I think we lost Rod's name. Did we lose Rod's name? Okay.
She'll probably be back. She's her connection's bad.
Oh yeah, okay. Okay. So, very brief introduction to qualitative data analysis or data collection. What I want you to do for this week is a qualitative lit review, right? Find the study, do the same things you've done before, but really learn from the authors. How did they interpret their data? Did they use any software to run the analysis? What types of methodology did they collect? This is just to kind of introduce you related to qualitative research, right? Now, that's data collection, so to speak. This next section is all about analyzing qualitative data. When we talk about analyzing qualitative data, y'all, we are talking about actually being able to look at words and understand their meaning to the person speaking them, right? So I've got a guy, and he's awesome. He's a great programmer. He works at one of our institutions. I talk to him at least once a week about stuff, right? Every time I call him, I'm saying, Sean, how's it going? You want to know what he says? Meh. And that's it. Every time. I know that means he's good, right? Because I've asked him a few times, like, are you sure? but different people communicate very differently. Different focus groups, different interviews, you're going to find people maybe saying the same thing, but they mean something completely different. I bought Delaney for her birthday last year a t-shirt that says, I'm fine, it's fine, everything is fine. She loves that shirt. She wears it, and when she wears it, I know she's not fine, right? But it's just one of those situations where think about the use of the word. I don't know. You all probably have good examples too, right? What are the trigger words that you hear that you've learned may not mean what the general public might assume if they just read it on paper. What are some of those trigger words for y'all? Not for you, but in your life.
Definitely the words, it is what it is. I just feel like it's so dismissive, and what is it? What is it then?
Well, what it is, right? Any others? Other examples?
I think it's funny. This is one of those generational things. When you text okay, depending on the age of the person who has texted that, it can mean a variety of things. And you have to know the age in order to interpret it appropriately and move forward in the conversation.
Yep. Yeah. I feel you there. That's why I like the what do they call them? Not GIFs, not emojis or emoticons or anything like that, but the reactions, right? The thumbs up. That's how I speak in text half the time. It's much easier. If I do thumbs down, what I mean. If I do thumbs up, that's an okay, but that's a positive okay. The thing about understanding qualitative data is you're not just listening to someone to be able to retell their story. You're actually looking for themes in what they're saying. So you're looking at how often they come back to something. Like if we were interviewing, first year college students, and several college students kept talking about high school, right? And then several other college students were talking about like looking forward to next year, versus the others that were talking about like, well, I miss my friends from high school. Like as you hear that and you really kind of understand what's being said, even though they're not coming out and saying like, I'm not sure college is right for me, right? You know what I mean? It's that kind of communication that is underlying in a lot of what we do and how we interact. So thinking about not only what's being said, but the frequency of what's being said, or the context behind what's being said, or of course the intensity. We all have a story, right? If you bring up a topic with me, like I might make you cry, like it's one of those situations where sometimes we don't ask those kinds of questions in regular life because we don't want to have a a sombering type of interaction with people, which is why generally, what do we ask people about when we pass them in the hall?
The weather.
How's the weather? How's your mama then? Right? What's for dinner? How's it going? That's about as specific as we might get, right? So as you might understand, like, we don't ask those in interviews or focus groups. That's not what we're doing. We're not trying to just barely touch the surface. We're really trying to get deeper. So as you look at transcripts from interviews, you need to watch for these things. You need to see these things come alive on the paper or on the screen. There we go. Next. Told you we're gonna do 2 in 1, so I'm making it work. All right, that's where we ended. Okay, so how do we analyze our data, our qualitative data? Well, we have a couple of different approaches. Content analysis, remember how I told you that there are secondary sources, right? A lot of the text, the media, physical items. This is when we look at maybe memos within a corporation or an organization. If you're trying to further analyze corporate culture, you may want to go find all the memos that have been sent out to the employees, right? How many of them talk about the dress code versus actually congratulating people for a job well done, those sorts of things. When we think about a narrative analysis, this is more looking at stories, like individual stories, and how we interpret, understand, observe, synthesize this like actual interview responses. A discourse analysis is like a narrative analysis because we're looking at interactions, but it's really thinking about what is the actual discourse between the two individuals at play. So how do people interact with each other, right? If I was asking y'all, if I was interviewing each of you, a narrative analysis might only focus on your responses to certain questions. A discourse analysis would go a little bit deeper and say, I only saw half of Laura Beth's face the entire time, right? I'm joking. But you know what I mean? Like she seems a little bit disconnected. And she seemed like the dog was more important. I'm again completely joking, just using it as an example. But it looks at your entire environment. Whereas a narrative, we could do a narrative analysis with like survey data or interview data from like the phone, but really getting into kind of the context between the communication of the respondent and the interviewer, looking much more deeper in that. Grounded theory is really more sociological in nature, sociological, psychological. We're trying to understand phenomenon. So if I interviewed all of you and my big question was, why did you sign up for this class? Well, I could ask all of you why you signed up for the class, right? But there's probably more to it than just whatever you would tell me. Some of you might tell me, well, it's part of my program. I know at least one of you is going to tell me you need an elective before you graduate. But there may be other reasons. Now, here's the thing. If you tell me it's part of your program, then I need to figure out why you took the program, right? We need to go deeper than that. And so looking at different kinds of relationships, this is where we think about qualitative data doesn't really provide us with a lot of causal analysis like quantitative data can, right? If the correlation is strong enough, and we have kind of, control groups and experimental groups, then we can talk about causal analysis. But in qualitative data, the grounded theory is probably about the closest we can get to really thinking about why people are doing or interacting in certain ways. Now, is anybody here familiar with coding qualitative data? I'm looking at y'all that are. Go ahead.
One time in undergrad, I was in a research project where we had to record animal behavior. So we had an ethnograph, and we just tallied if they did like self-grooming or bit someone, bit themselves. Would that be coding?
Well, that's observational data, right? Is that a yes? Sorry.
I guess so, but we all had to pass like a validity test. Like we had to meet 80% or maybe 90% of what the professor would have identified. So
yeah. So yes, you are all observing, but in order to determine validity and how you assessed or rated or assigned these behaviors, you had to measure what's called inter-rater reliability, which means you were rating someone or an animal. Kara was rating the animal, Mamta was rating the animal, and Tim was rating the animal. And guess what? You all rated the animal behaviors around the same time period, the same way, right? You all saw them scratch their left ear or something like that, right? Make sense? So, so coding is specifically with qualitative data, thinking about both observations, but also interviews. What if you asked me to tell you about my most vivid memory with my 101-year-old grandfather that passed away 6 years ago on my birthday? Told you I can make you cry. But no, what if you ask me about my most vivid memory? Well, I'm going to tell you a story, right? How are you going to code that language that I tell you? It's not a physical, scratching. I'm not going to scratch my ear while I tell you that story. You're going to have to figure out a way to code my stories and talk to other people about their most vivid memories with their grandparents, and how we all have some similarities and differences in the way that we describe these vivid memories, whether it's positive, negative, or neutral. Remember how we talked about frequency and intensity, right? This is what we mean by coding. It's actually an exercise where we assign these different categories, we classify the information, and then, like you mentioned, yes, hopefully you have people to come behind you or with you and test the reliability of your coding, because if Laura Beth only identifies like 2 things and Mamta identifies 5, well then we've got a little bit of a difference there, right? And this, you need to kind of make sure you're all on the same page as you work through it. So here we are, making good time, I think. I want to put you in 2 breakout rooms, okay? And I want to find this file. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a transcript of an interview. And the groups are just going to be 2 and 2, okay? So work with each other and work through how to code this interview transcript, okay? One sec. Okay. And we're going to incorporate a break into this as well, okay? Sound good? Uh-oh. Oh, shoot. Do it again. There it is. All right. Does everybody see it in the chat? Okay. Let me talk through it before I put you in groups. All right. So we're looking at academic success and creativity in college, all right? That's our purpose of our research. We're looking at testing hypotheses about student success, not looking at entrance test scores or high school rank or GPA, but really looking at their emotional experiences in high school, okay? You can't really quantify that, right, in the academic record that a student brings with them. So we do individual interviews. So we've got pleasant, positive rather, unpleasant, negative feelings associated with high school. All of us do, right? My first year in high school, there was a really mean bully that rode the bus, same bus I did, and he would come up because I've got these really big ears. I don't know if y'all know this or not, because you can barely see me on this Brady Bunch because I had really massive ears on my head as a kid because I hadn't grown into them. And he would come up behind me and thump them all the time. He was much bigger than me, really strong, and really just a crude dude. It really upset me, ruined a lot of days. And apparently the bus driver told the school contacted my mom and dad. It all turned into basically a long discussion. So that's just an example, right? We all have positive and negative feelings associated with high school. The bus is my negative. I would rather take a Uber than sit on a bus, right? Any day of the week. Just because I hate people sitting behind me. That's just one of those things that still associates. So anyhow, we've got a lot of these experiences, and they're associated with a wide variety of actors, right, and individuals. The course, the teacher, the students, the facilities, all these things. So what we want to do here is first read the transcript. It's on page 2. And as you read the transcript, talk to each other about whether or not there's any kind of evidence about visual experiences, auditory experiences, olfactory, gustatory. Y'all know what this means, right? Visual being see, auditory being hear, olfactory being smell, gustatory being taste, tactile being touch, okay? So, what are their experiences with objects, with persons, and with events? And rate basically find the line number. This is how I do it. I give a line number to each line in a transcript, and anywhere where I find an experience that may be a sound or a memory of music, for example, associated with my girlfriend at the time, right? Very like her playing her cello. I dated a girl who played cello. It was beautiful sounding. That's a very positive experience. I talked about that in transcript line number 12. So boom, that's the respondent, right? I'm going to put R12, okay? If the interviewer asks about it, something about, or maybe wants the interviewee to talk more about the food in the cafeteria, right? That's interviewer line 13, right? And so what you can do is, or that would actually probably be pretty neutral because it's the interviewer. The respondent can talk about how nasty the pizza was, like cardboard, right? So R13, right? See what I mean? Got it? Okay. So for each of the relevant words and phrases in the transcript, I want you to put the line number into the appropriate cell. And then we're going to come back and we're going to compare your results, both groups. Okay. So you're gonna basically help each other rate each other, right? So we're going to see where you agree and where you disagree. All right. This is coding. Sound fun? Or would you rather do t-tests? This is important stuff too, right? Let me ask you this. We would never know this Remember how I talked earlier about new knowledge? Just like data analysis tells us new things, we get a lot from this kind of stuff too. It's about 120 lines long. Shouldn't take you too long to read, but I'm going to give you 30 minutes, okay? Including a break. Make sure you take a break in there too, okay? All right. Ready to go into breakouts?
Yeah, can I be put in a group with someone using a computer? I'm on an iPad today.
Yeah, sure. Who's using a computer? Manta said thumbs up. Cool. All
Thanks.
right. And Karen King. There we go. See, I'm going to come jump in, check on y'all too, okay? All right, see y'all in a bit.
Hey, Eric, Momto was wondering if she could share her screen. Eric, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Hey, sorry. I was saying, yeah, I did that right before I came in, so you should be
Oh.
able to share the screen.
Thank
Oh.
you.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
It's okay.
Anything else, y'all?
Mm-mm.
That will be it.
Nope. I do have. It's fine. I can see it.
Okay.
Laura Beth, did you say something more?
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought you said I do have one more question. I thought I jumped out like right when you were asking something.
No.
My bad.
here. Eric, we have questions.
Ask.
So can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so this sentence we have highlighted here, we're just in discussion about whether we code it as a positive because the respondent is talking about their friends that they really loved having lunch with from the question before. However, he's describing why they were friends, which is all like the bummer reasons that they decided to start hanging out together. So do we code it as positive and negative or as ambiguous?
That's a great question. You know, we do have ambiguous as an option,
Yep.
but I would focus on the feelings that are expressed here. Where does he talk about how he felt?
Got it. Because they all felt like outcasts.
And Kara and Ken,
Yes.
you can have multiple emotional responses in one phrase. So go ahead.
No, we were talking about that amongst ourselves.
Yeah. So even though they felt like outcasts, they had similarities in the fact that they seemed to be just different, right?
Mhm.
So partially, I'm looking up. Hold on, I'm pulling up my version. So yeah, so the event itself was both positive and negative. Because lunch, he had someone, but they all felt like outcasts together. So I would actually code line 23 more negative. Line 22, he had friends, right?
Got it.
So interactions with persons versus interactions with events. Lunch
Okay.
may have a negative connotation in his memory, but the people don't in this regard. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So
Yeah.
event, negative response, persons, positive response.
Got it.
Does that
Oh,
help?
it does. It's a little more finicky than I was thinking we got to be. Okay.
Okay. It's
I
okay.
like it.
It's okay. Yeah.
Um,
What else? What else is up?
I'm also curious about, like, do we go through and try to accomplish a code for every line, or like, do we need to code every interviewer's question?
I, that's a good question.
It's like question
I
3,
would.
what about lunchtime?
Oh, where is that? Sorry.
It's line 14 right here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not looking at Charles anymore. I'm looking
Oh,
at
no,
Charles.
that's all right. It's just a question that says, what about lunchtime? I mean, I can write down that that's a neutral question about an event. Is that what we're supposed to do?
Yeah, I mean, you
Okay.
can. I necessarily don't normally focus so much on the questions of the interviewer, more so the respondent.
Oh, great.
But
Okay.
sometimes the interviewer can be not so neutral. I'm looking at my version. Yeah, I color code. I don't know if you'll color code. Are you a color coder?
I mean, not on this, but historically, yes, that's my favorite way to do things.
Yeah. So I like to color code positive in green and negative in red, right? And so just so you know, like whenever I first did this, I didn't focus on the interviewer at all because I knew you only have 30 minutes. So focus
Yeah.
on the okay.
Okay.
What about lunchtime? Yeah, I think because I don't see much above it.
Well, that's, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not specifically that. I just
It's just
didn't know
asking
how
about
much.
specific. So the interviewer here is trying to think about different places where memories occur, right, and interactions occur. Yeah. So it's just an introductory like question, changing the topic, right? Cool. Bless you.
Thanks.
All right.
Okay. And then there's just one other thing. Sorry for my now weird voice.
Bye.
When a question seems to encompass not a specific sense, we're just coding it under unclear because it seems to encompass everything. Is that the way to land?
Let's look. Anything? Let's see.
So like on line 11, when the respondent says it was a fearful place, there's not really any specifics about like just a place being fearful. It could be every kind of sense. So we just tagged it as unclear.
A fearful place?
Yeah.
I would call that negative.
Well, no, yes, we did negative, but we didn't categorize it under
oh,
visual
oh,
or
oh,
auditory.
the columns, you mean?
Yeah, the columns, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I would call that tactile.
Huh.
Well, because you feel fear, right?
Okay.
I mean, a fear can cause a physical reaction,
Yeah, like
in
an
a person.
embodied response. Yep, got it.
Like shiver, all that kind of stuff.
Yep. Okay, thanks.
Hey, no problem. Keep going. I'm just gonna observe.
I think that's all I remember. Okay,
No, y'all talk. Yeah.
we will.
Act like I'm not here.
All right, Ken.
Yeah.
Oh,
Also, where did you find this text? I mean, the file. I can't find it in the
oh, it's in the chat.
in the chat.
Yeah. Do you want me to, I can.
Yeah, because I
put it in
can't.
there.
I don't think I have it in the chat in my chat.
Hey, Eric, we actually just, we're going to take a 5-minute break.
Okay.
We got about halfway done.
Okay. We're gonna come back at 1/2 past.
Okay, great.
Okay. So I'll pull you back in, and but yeah. All right.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I'm seeing. No, I didn't see it yet.
Okay, I just sent it again into the chat.
I don't know, probably because I'm using phone.
Oh, it's on you're on your phone?
Yeah, I mean my computer is in front of me as well, but yeah, I mean it's all right. I'll just write a note first, and then I'll figure out how to get that sheet.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So back to here, back to here. We're gonna switch this one over to here. We'll pop back down. All right, we were in this section right here. So we need to code this part, which we talked about with Eric, and now I have to remember what we said, which was tactile because it's feelings, positive about people, negative about the event. Yeah.
Positive about people.
Yeah, because he's talking about his two friends at lunch.
I thought
Donald
he
and-
okay. I thought he
Right.
liked the lunch.
Well, he liked lunch. Yes. So specifically in this paragraph on line 22, he's positive about Donald and Bernie. But
Okay.
then this part right here felt like outcasts.
Yes.
That would be negative
Negative.
about
Okay.
feeling like an outcast.
With friends or is with lunch?
Sort of the background feeling of being outcasts.
Okay, so like everything.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's R22 is positive people, positive persons, tactile. And then R23 is negative event. Oh my gosh, we're running out of room here. Except
You
that.
don't have to put R next to them if they're all respondents. So
Great. Okay.
Mhm.
That's what we wondered. Can we do like R17 through 19? Or should we just code all the lines?
well, remember you need to know specifically like what's being talked about in those lines. So
Okay.
so a full like sentence or multiple lines usually isn't very helpful here. You're looking for specific words that you're coding into certain things.
Specific words. Okay. Okay. Because when we analyze it, this is what we're going to look at. This table. Is that right?
Yep. Yep. And when you're done, by the way, we're going to finish up we're going to come back together in 5 minutes at half
Oh,
past
gosh.
the hour.
Okay.
Yeah. So go ahead and maybe do 1 or 2 more, but then email me this file so I can pull it up on my screen.
Oh, okay.
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 Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. No problem.
Laura Beth, Manta, are you there?
Yes.
Hey, please send me whichever file, the Word document that y'all use. Go ahead and email it to me so I can pull it up on my side.
Okay.
Sound good?
Mhm.
Hey, Eric.
Hey.
Sorry, my Google Home is like yelling at me. So we did a spreadsheet because I don't have a computer today, and I didn't know that we were supposed to do if it was positive or negative. So that's my bad.
Okay.
And I think
Do me a
Mom
favor.
can send you that
Can
photo.
you take a picture of that? Can you take a picture of what you just pulled up
Sure.
and email it to me?
Okay.
I just need to be able to have something on the screen so we can compare y'all to the others.
Okay.
Got it. Thanks, Laura Beth. All right, welcome back. How was that exercise? Whole new world, right?
It was new.
Different, yeah.
Yeah.
A new fantastic point of view. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
it
was
made me
starting to
think
think.
of this lecture we just had yesterday in a class with Dr. Bishop, and we've been talking about collaboration and why it's important to be collaborative instead of just doing teamwork. Anyway, I felt like that was a very collaborative experience.
Yeah.
We'll let Dr. Bishop know that you did that in my class too, because we have not, we don't coordinate this stuff, right? I have my class, they have their classes. I talked a little bit about it with Wendy some, but I'm glad to hear that there's some good overlap. So let's see if I can remember how to do this there. All right, you ready? Ready to see how you did? So thanks, Laura Beth and Manta, for doing the opposite columns. Columns to rows, rows to columns. That just makes it easier. It's more of an exercise for y'all, right? So here we go. Here we go. All right. So it looks like we'll start with meals. We'll start with the meals. Except there's only object, person, and events here, right? So object, person, events. We're good. We're good. We're good. You don't have positive, negative, ambiguous, or neutral. Is that right, Laura Beth?
Yes, this is a relic. It seems like I'm working in the 19th century still, but my computer is being repaired. But I could
Yeah.
see a few doctorate people still writing down records.
Cool. What is this last? Does it say unclear?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So let's talk about some disagreement really quickly. On line 22, Laura Beth and Manta said the experience or the explanation related to a person was unclear, right, as to whether or not it was hitting on any of these senses. Whereas Kara and Ken, they recognize that on line 22 we're talking about persons also. That's good. That's somewhat of an agreement, right? However, they classify it as tactile. Kara and Ken, tell me what you mean by tactile. And I don't know if you're talking about a line or a question.
I think it was line 22.
Yeah. Okay, good. Good.
Yeah. Oh, this is the one we asked about. Because it's
Don't give it away. Don't give it away.
Sorry. It's a feeling.
Right. It's a feeling. And emotional feelings elicit physical responses, right? If I scared you, which I did to my wife just the other night when she was watching a scary show, like she physically like flails, right? And they felt like outcasts. And so although it's more a little bit, I think if we had a psychological one up here, right, that would be a little bit more direct. But yeah, when we talk about feelings and how things make us feel, that can have a tactile effect, right? So, but glad that you both picked up on line 22. It looks like also Laura Beth and Mamta, you also talked about line 12, unclear, and we also have line 11. I wonder if they're close to each other. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think it's probably the same situation. We wrote some feelings emotionally, but ours is line 12 because we thought it would be more like the spaces, like the classroom or the gym, would be like traveling through them were the events. So that's why we put it as an event instead of an object. But yeah.
Sure. So overall, similar things, but again, thinking about how fear transpires, right, in this kind of description. What about? Let's see. Let's go up. Let me see. I see. Y'all did a lot, Laura Beth.
Hey, you guys were
What
prolific.
about? See what, Kara?
I said Laura Beth and Manta were prolific. Ken and I had a lot of, we did a lot of discussion. We could not get ourselves sorted.
Let's go
I
look at
think for
line
our case,
17.
she said something, I agreed, and I said something, she agreed. So
Mm.
that's how it worked.
Gotcha. Now, Laura Beth and Mamta, is this R17 right here? Okay, so you've got a smell or olfactory, right? Object. R17, Kara and Ken classified that as a positive event related to gustatory senses. Take a look at it.
It
What
was
do
a
you think?
sandwich, so we wrote it in object because it was a sandwich.
I think we meant to write it in taste, but we wrote it in smell. So that would be an error we would find.
Okay. That's okay. That's why we do this, right? We cross-validate. So yeah, so maybe you both meant taste. But it looks like I'm not going to put words in y'all's mouths, but I'm just guessing here. I'm assuming Laura Beth and Mamta focused on the food itself, whereas Kara and Ken focused on the event of lunch as an event. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, because we also talked about what the food looks like. He describes it with, different words, and those were all very image provoking for us.
Yeah, for sure. And food does that. Man, I can talk about my banana bread that I made right now. Y'all, I made a full loaf of banana bread. I only poured half of it in the pan. I sprinkled chocolate chips all throughout, poured the other half on top, sprinkled roasted walnuts and pecans on top of that, baked it up. How many people's mouths are watering right now?
Mine.
Yeah,
Eric.
there's still some left at work if you want to go get some. I brought it to work and shared it with folks. But that's the thing about food. Like, it's very easy for us to recognize those sorts of sensory type responses because it's something we can all appeal to. But what about the things that are a little bit harder to capture? Mamta and Laura Beth, talk us through your sounds. Where were those? Is that R50 or 51?
Yeah, the 50 and 51 were the teacher's voice singing a theorem. And there was something
Good.
else about Bell a little bit earlier.
The violin lesson that he took, there was also hearing and touching.
Which one?
In 36.
Oh, 36. Sorry. Yeah. Join the orchestra, start playing violin, right? Yeah. So what would you say are some of the overall themes that you gleaned from this interview? are there emotional connections to these experiences that could relate back to student success in college? Did we ever get back to the idea of student success in college?
We-
No, not really,
we-
right? This is just an ex. Go ahead, Manta, sorry. Or Lord Beth, sorry.
Oh, we only made it about halfway, but I don't think we did.
Right. Right. That's okay. I mean, again, someone asked that the last time I presented this case study to them, and I said, good point, right? This is just an excerpt. It was a much longer protocol. But you see how the interviewer gives us this kind of unstructured interview, right? Most memorable visual images of the school, blah, 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 any other, right? And then, were there any pleasant smells? Apparently, some perfume. But this is pretty structured, but there is a little bit of going off script, right? So take that, and one thing I wanted to show you was not that I know of, I don't think y'all did this, but this is kind of what I like to do. I like to color code, especially if we're looking for positives, negatives. It's pretty easy, right? So look at that. Got my nose bloody. That's red, like blood. Not in the classroom is positive, right? Fearful is negative. Younger than most, negative. This large arcade arches. I think you mentioned something about being interested in architecture, right? So this is again just a really quick way of kind of walking through it the first time and then coding it more specifically. None of the gym teachers stand out. None of the English teachers stand out. That's neutral. You see that? Okay. Anyway, just want to kind of give you an example. Good job, y'all. Let us then come to the end of our last live lesson lecture and talk about the homework assignments for this. All of your assignments are still in place. So what I want you to do after the discussion 7 is do a different study with a different methodology. So if you first find a qualitative research article that uses focus groups, use the next one to do in-depth interviews or observation, right? Make sure you have a different methodology just to give you a little bit more exposure, okay? And help you learn how data are analyzed and synthesized and coded in different ways. So that is part of your next to last, like the last week that we're not going to meet, right? All that's due then. I've already opened it up for you if you want to go ahead and get started. Since we're talking about it tonight, I didn't feel it'd be right to talk about it and not let you go ahead and get started. Sound good? Okay. You do have a lab assignment. Last lab assignment. This is going to take you back a long time ago to that project presentation that you did. Do you remember that? You know how previously on other assignments I've asked you to think about additional ideas, additional ways of analyzing data, right? In all of your lab assignments? Hey, well, you analyze data for your project presentation. Now I want you to dig deeper and I want you to come up with a qualitative research interview protocol, okay? As if you are going, for example, Julianne, right? She did maternal health, right? For her, since she's not on tonight, she couldn't be with us, but for her, I would expect for her to put together an interview protocol to interview postpartum women about their health, right? You see what I mean? So take your research one step further. Manta and Ken, y'all looked at weather, right? Mars and the seasons and all that kind of stuff, maybe you should come up with an interview protocol related back to astronomers or physicists and talk to them about where they think their field is going, right? We don't want to ask them about the weather on Mars necessarily, but we want to ask them more deeper questions about how they're doing things or why they're doing things. Remember, qualitative data doesn't ask what, it asks why, how, those sorts of questions. So I've given you an example in Canvas under the week 14. Oh, that's not it. Sorry, wrong one. That's critical reflection. It is digging deeper. And I've given you this interview protocol article, so feel free, that is your resource, okay? Feel free to use other resources, but don't feel like you're gonna go at this alone. The other resources that you've got in each of these weeks, here's an interview instrument example, talking about analyzing qualitative data, the field guide for qualitative research methods, all of these things are available. So that's for the week. This is for this week, right? And so this is for next week. Even though we're out, I do expect, because the only days we're really off is Thanksgiving Day for the lecture. I still expect for you to do these assignments, which is why I've gone ahead and opened them early. After that, the week that I can't be with you, you have a critical reflection, and that's for the entire course. A critical reflection on your own learning, on your own processes, on your own pathway. And then discussion 9, at the very beginning of class, we looked for data in the news, right?
Mhm.
And you found data analysis in the news. What I want you to do now is look for an article that's been published since, news article, right, or a report that's been published since we've been in this class, right? So something much more recent. And do the similar thing that we've done before, but this time, you know more about reliability and validity. You know more about assumptions for different types of tests. You know how to consume this type of information. So be more critical, take it to the next level, and let this kind of be a very different response than maybe the first time. Go back and look at your first response and see, wow, man, I didn't know too much back then, right? And that's okay. But go back and be more critical and take that approach for looking for data in our everyday life. And so that's pretty much finishing us up for the course. Aside from the final exam, which is due by December 13th, structured very much in the same way as all of your other tests, you're going to have the qualitative data collection and analysis on it. You're going to have chapters 9 and 10. So be sure to review all of it. It is not at all comprehensive, right? It is only on the data, only on information that we've covered since we stopped for lecture or for exam 2. So you've got 2 different data sets. So make sure you download both ahead of time, and you know how it works. Again, you'll have 180 minutes, so 3 hours to take it. It is your final exam. So be sure to let me know if you have any questions ahead of time. It will not open until, it will not open until December 6th. So that's just protocol for final exams. Okay, y'all? Got it? Any questions?
I just have a question about qualitative analysis in general, too.
Is it subjective? Yes.
Well, it seems like there are so many more opportunities for bias to come into play here, like so many points along the way where bias could just spook in and change things.
Mhm.
Okay, great.
It does. It takes a lot of self-control, a lot of self-reflection. One of the things that I don't know if I've told y'all this before, but until the pandemic hit and we moved into this house, um, and actually about 6 months after moving into this house, neither my wife nor I had ever had the internet in our homes. And we've been together for 6 years, and that just happened, spring of 2020. But anytime someone's talking to me, they make assumptions like, "Oh yeah, Netflix or the internet. We're pretty low tech." And so it's one of those things that like just that little bit of assumption is the one that I always realize. Everyone makes the assumption that everyone else has the internet, right?
Mhm.
And so yeah, you're gonna catch yourself making assumptions about why people are responding in a certain way all the time. And so probably again the best way to both prevent and limit that in the data collection phase is to learn how to keep a very neutral demeanor.
Mm.
But on the data analysis phase, you gotta look at it with fresh eyes, probably multiple times, and also have someone who's maybe got a different perspective than you review it to see how much you might differ, right?
Mhm.
But this isn't something you can just go do. It's one of those things you have to go through some training and train yourself with. But again, knowing that it's a very small part of this course, I felt like it would be you would be remiss if you did not have at least some introduction to qualitative data analysis.
Mhm.
In fact, data analysis is the name of the class, not quantitative data analysis, right?
Yeah. Well, and so then it seems also to me that the analysis is going to take a heck of a lot longer. Is that also accurate with all this coding and color blocking and cutting and pasting that they talked about in the articles? And like we can't just throw our
Oh,
spreadsheet through some software, which is much more fun.
yeah. In all honesty, not only
Okay.
that, but people take and if you interview someone and record it, you can pay someone to transcribe it, but they may not transcribe it well. And in all honesty, transcription services, even Google Talk to Text, isn't the perfect solution, right? So again, go back one more step and just think about actually getting what information you do have into a usable format, right? It does take longer. A qualitative research project is typically a very long dissertation for all my friends that have done qualitative research projects or dissertations. But they generally they don't focus so much on the total population or representing a broader population or sample. So qualitative research is generally used to, again, explore a particular topic or idea or phenomenon. And in doing that, um, you don't have the time or money to really spend years talking to thousands of people and trying to make sense of thousands of people. It's just not fortuitous. So when we think about qualitative research, we generally focus our efforts on specific individuals that should be, in this study for whatever reason. And it's even though it may sound like it's going to take a lot longer, you might only interview 13 people for a qualitative research dissertation. But me getting 1,000 plus people to respond to a survey can also take just as long. Because if we're talking about generalizability
Mhm.
of those kinds of parametric tests that we've talked about, you got to have the sample size and the variety and the variation within the data itself. Qualitative data, you get what you get. Makes sense. I mean, there's pros and cons to both. If you're looking for your professor to to draw a hard line in the sand and say this one's better. I'm not going to.
No, I'm not at all. I clearly know what I would prefer to do, but I was just trying to understand if my assumptions about the process just from listening and reading were accurate. So yeah, thanks. You answered my question.
It is what
Yeah.
it is, Kara.
Shut it. It's fine. So, what else, y'all? What else you got? Happy holidays. Anybody graduating in the spring? Are you pointing at me, Kara?
No, I'm pointing at Laura Beth. I don't know why I think you guys know that.
Me. Okay, Laura Beth, great. I'm gonna try to come, so hopefully see you there.
I think a few of your other class, a few of your other students will be too. Callie and Chris Crenshaw.
And Nay.
I think you had them too. And Nay, yeah, but she's
Yep.
off the call.
And what, Kara?
Ratane.
Oh, Rotterdam. Yeah. Okay, good. Is that what you were saying, Kara?
Oh
Nay?
yeah, I think Juliana too.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, did Chris and Callie tell you all about their time with me? It was fun.
No, I think they spoke highly of you as a professor, and you know, I had a choice of electives, and I picked this one mostly because your syllabus was together, and I could see what the semester is going to be like. So, I mean, that's always appreciated.
I apologize for putting Thanksgiving on there. I'm one of those people that just I all the way done. No, that's cool. Yeah, no, just if you talk to those former students of mine, tell them I said hello. It was a good. They were a good group too. Y'all are always. This is a great class. Honestly, if I can challenge you to do one thing as you go through this life of yours, challenge yourself every couple of years to come up with a course that if I asked you, hey Mamta, hey Ken, hey Laura Beth, hey Kira, I want you to teach a class to whoever, that I want it to be the class that you want to teach people, like the one that you have the most, not necessarily passion, but like the one that fits your world right now. And the reason I say that is because when Wendy approached me about teaching this course several years ago, this has always been the type of class that I've wanted to teach people, because this is my life, right? So I'm glad I'm glad y'all signed up for it. But I also want you to know, like, this is my ideal course. I asked the same question of one of my colleagues who is one of our attorneys at the system office, and he said, that's a good question. I would like to teach a class on religion and law. And I was like, really? He said, yeah. It's like the First Amendment, big deal, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, you don't have to answer me tonight. Think about it. Let me know one day, if you find one or you figure it out. But like, if you could teach anyone anything, what would that course be? And then make it happen. Deal? Cool. All right. I've taken enough of your time. We're right at the top of the hour. Feel free, reach out. Don't be strangers, okay? We're going to go a couple of weeks, and the course is still going to be active. I'm happy to jump on a Zoom, jump on a phone call. You've got my cell phone number, so even if you need to just text something, do it. Y'all have not at all reached out to me like my prior sections have, which is why I keep saying, don't be strangers, okay? They had questions. I'm glad we talked about them. I don't want y'all to go into the end of this class with any confusion. So with that, I'll stay on if you have any questions. Otherwise, feel free to sign off whenever you're ready.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Ma'am Tankara.
I had to ask you about something about.
Okay.
I can sign off if you want, if it's because mine's non-critical.
No, feel free to stay.
Yeah. Could you stop recording if it's possible?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I always forget that.